Kia ora, welcome everybody. This is our last webinar of 2025, and this year what we'll be doing is just doing a recap of the presentations that were in our online user group meeting. So for our online user group meeting, we always have presentations from a range of different clients, and often we see ways that they're using Vernon CMS that we haven't thought of, or they're using tools that maybe not all users are aware of. So it's an opportunity for us to do a run through what are some of the key things that came out of those presentations, the ways that people were using Vernon. And so I'll just show you highlights from each of those different talks. The first presentation we had in the user group meeting was from Queensland Parliamentary Services. They have a significant art collection and some social history items, and those are on display through the parliamentary buildings and through the offices of various ministers and employees. One thing that they've done in the last year is implement Vernon Browser so that they've got an easy way for the broader team to access the collection. That's allowing their team to more easily pick artworks and objects that they want rotated for display in different places. So an example might be a new Minister of Parliament is moving into a particular office and they want to display particular artworks that maybe best represent the particular area of the city that they're from. I've currently got open their Vernon Browser site. On their homepage, they're using our featured collection concept to provide shortcuts to broad areas of the collection. And then they're also using the highlights facility to hand pick particular objects that illustrate a theme. I could just jump to the entire collection by using the search button right at the top, and that'll just show me everything. And so something that Vernon Browser is very good at is showing the end user different ways to explore and fine-tune the set of records they're looking at. So I could easily get it to show me just the works which we've got images, and maybe only the works of a particular type. Maybe I'm only interested in the things that are artworks. And then from there, I can view any particular item that I'm interested in. We always try to present the end users with different ways to explore the collection. So trying to avoid ever having a dead end. So in this case, I'm viewing one individual artwork, but it's very easy from that point to then continue on and say, well, I want to see everything that's been flagged as a painting. And so we always provide those links to jump to other similar types of works that are in the online collection. From that homepage, one of the categories that they've created highlights for are their Origins collection. So these are some of the oldest social history items that are in their collection. And they're making use of a relatively new feature in Vernon Browser where you can publish PDF files. So they've done things like scanning member books from the 1800s. So you can see the various notes and comments that ministers added in those books 100 years ago. So as well as images of individual pages, they're live publishing PDFs that they're linking to Vernon CMS behind the scenes. So I could click on that membership suggestion book and I'd be able to flip through the pages and see all of the members' suggestions from the 1800s. The second presentation that we had was from another one of our Vernon Browser projects, and this was from Anzac Memorial in Sydney. So their team talked about how they're digitising the collection and how that collection has grown in the time since a year ago when they first launched this website. Again, they're using those featured collections to provide shortcuts to particular subsets of their collection. So for instance, the various branches of the military that they represent. I could jump straight to the Air Force collection. And again, I can use those filters which we customize for each individual client. So again, I could say I'm only interested in the things that have images and perhaps only the ones of a certain type, maybe only the clothing. and I'd see all of the different clothing items that they have from their Air Force collection. And then again, we provide those options to then jump to related material. So maybe somebody was researching material from World War II. That's provided as a link directly on the records. So it could jump to everything in their collection that has been added with that tag. So there's several thousand in that category with photographs and physical objects. One of the things that Anzac Memorial mentioned in their talk is Google Analytics. That's a free product where you can monitor the visitors that are coming to your website and then get a better understanding of what's popular and what types of visitors are coming there. I'll switch to Google Analytics for the page where we manage Vernon Browser's demo site. So Google Analytics lets you see a live overview of who's currently on that website at any given moment. So at the moment, there's 124 people that are on our demo site, and then it provides you ways to explore different information about those people and what they're accessing. So if I go to the Explore section, it'll give me a breakdown of all the different things that I can search on and view reports about. So for instance, I can see what are the pages that are popular. You might be wanting to know, well, what objects in our collection are generating the most interest? And Google Analytics is a good way to get stats about that. So if I click on pages, it'll immediately show me all of the different web pages and which are the ones that are receiving the most visits. So the main objects landing page, which shows you all of the online collection, is the most popular page, but we can also see individual specific objects with the Vernon ID number of those objects. So this particular object in the last week has been viewed 11 times. Internally, we also use Google Analytics to understand the technology that our visitors are using, so that we can better fine-tune the software to meet the different types of devices and screen sizes of those end users. And so that's part of the breakdown that Google Analytics provides. So in the tech section, I can click on Overview, and I can get a breakdown of what types of computers, screens, and devices people are using. So how many of them on desktops, how many on mobile, what different sizes of screens the visitors are accessing. So we can see that most of the visitors are on fairly large resolution monitors, but there are people that are on a whole range of smaller devices. We can also see some more information about the individual users. So if I have a look at user attributes, one of the things we can see is where are the visitors coming from? So that can be really interesting to see, well, what parts of the world are people discovering your collection? And we can see that on our demo site, that's a whole range of different places, and that'll vary day by day. In the views that we're looking at, this is just showing us the last week, but we're able to change, or the last 4 weeks, and we're able to change that easily to view a wider period. We might want to summarize for the last year what are the different places that people have been coming to the collection from. The next talk that we had was from Deakin University, and they were talking about how they run annual audits of the collection, physically checking all of the items that are on display, seeing that they're still in the location that they expect them to be, and checking things like the condition of those items. I'll switch to our demo system and show a couple of examples of features that they're using. Firstly, they're relying on the current location that's recorded in Vernon to be able to pull out lists of items that are in each of those different places. So I can use the advanced search button in the top toolbar, and I could run a search on the current location field. Maybe I'm going to be doing an audit of everything that is in gallery number 1. Gallery number 1's divided into a few different areas, but maybe I'll be reviewing the whole of that room as one single exercise. So let's tick gallery 1, and it'll automatically include those 2 different wall locations that are within it. I can then run a search and pull out a list of all those items. I might be just reviewing that directly in Vernon, where I can use tools like List Manager to quickly see all of those items. But in the case of Deakin University, they were printing out physical lists that they could then carry in person into those galleries to tick off items and add further notes. And so you can make use of the reporting tool in Vernon to create a template that captures all of the information you need during that physical auditing process. So I can click on the report button, and I could open a saved report that I've already got created. So I've got a report that I've created called Inventory Checklist. If I edit that report, we can see it's using our integration with Microsoft Word, where we're able to do more formatting on how that information is presented, and we're also able to embed the primary image and align that to the information. And so I've got 7 different fields, just basic descriptive fields of those items, plus the image in that template. And so if I run that, I've just created a simple table where I've got the key details, including the material and the measurements, and I've embedded the thumbnail of each item, and then I've also added a blank column, which might be where we're ticking off those items as we locate them. But you could include other further columns where you might be making notes about the condition, and that might be later transcribed back into Vernon. Because that's being generated as a Word document, you could actually type directly into this on a laptop, and that might be imported via Excel later directly onto those records. At the end of that process, Deakin University are also updating the location information to show that they've done that check, and also to change the information if any of it was going to be wrong. They're making use of the bulk inventory tool to do that. So I can go to location functions, bulk inventory, and there we can just say all of the objects that have been found in the same location. So we could say the new location is that it is their permanent display location in gallery number 1, and we just directly enter in the accession numbers of all the things that were found there. The bulk inventory screen does have an option to check items with the reconcile button. So that does an automated search on that location, and it'll give you a report of any of the objects that weren't found. So that's not something you need to manually reconcile. The system can automatically compare the list of items that you've put here with what's supposed to be there, and give you the ones that are missing to then follow up on further. The next presentation we had was from Penny, where she was talking about the procedural control tool in Vernon. That's the tool where you can define a workflow of different steps for all of the key processes in Vernon. And that includes the object file. So objects move through a number of different legal statuses in their lifetime with your organisation, perhaps starting with being considered for acquisition, being accessioned once they're formally brought into the collection and catalogued and location tracked, and then they might later be de-accessioned if they're sold off or damaged in some way. That process is true for all of our activity files as well. So things like an outward loan, you can have different statuses that say what are the steps that you're moving through as that loan's considered, approved, and finally agreed. And then when the objects are moved in and out, tracking all of the things that are happening to the objects at each of those steps. So the procedural control tool is very powerful in that it lets us set up rules for each of those steps. So for instance, required information that you might have to enter. And it also lets us set up automated actions and reports, like generating an email at a certain step, or maybe automatically opening the bulk move facility when the objects are sent out as part of that loan. So if I updated this particular loan, for example, I might say, well, now the agreement's been signed with the borrower, and I'll save that record. And so this is the first example of something that procedural control can do for us. It's automatically applying a rule to say that there's pieces of information that must be entered before we're allowed to advance to that step. So it was saying that the approval person has to be filled in. So let's just say that I approve that. I can use the shortcut of T for today. And then I can save that and it will allow me to continue. This particular step of agreement signed has been tied to a saved report format to automatically print out a schedule of the objects that are in that outward loan. So let's say all of those objects should appear in the schedule. And that's another example of one of those word merge templates. It's also been set up to automatically generate an email. So the emails can be set up again like a Word template where you have some information that will be the same for every email, plus data that's stored in Vernon for that record embedded in the contents of the email. So we can see there's an introduction and an ending section of that email, and then just a simple listing of the objects appearing in the middle. So this is an automated email to our locations officer so that they know that those objects now have to be packaged up, ready for sending to the borrower. And then in the background, there was the template that it generated. So we had a simple header. We'd use Word to embed a logo for our organization, and then a listing of the objects in columns. And so if I look briefly behind the scenes, we can see how that was set up for the agreement signed step in the outward loan process. I've already opened that up earlier, so the system remembers that is a link that I can go to, but otherwise we go to database other files to access any of those status files. And so I can search for the sign step. And on the rules page, that's where we've set up the approval person is required. So each of those rules are just simple definitions saying what field to check and what information you're checking for. In this case, I'm just checking if that field's blank and showing a warning if that's the case. In the actions is where I can set up things like those email templates. And so that's similar to word merge, where we have a basic layout with some special symbols saying where we want the fields to be included. And then lastly, we can link to any saved reports that have been pre-created. So I'd already made a loan schedule in the reporting module, and I've just linked it to that one status. The last presentation that we had was from the Sargent Gallery, where Jennifer was telling us about how they've done a major redevelopment of the museum and gallery, and then how that's affected the storage of a huge portion of the collection. So they've had to do handling and packaging and moving of almost the entire collection, and they've made use of a number of different tools as part of that. If I open up a few example objects, we can see some of the different fields in Vernon that they've been making use of. I've got a multi-part object, which is a coffee set. Vernon supports having more than one image for records if you need to. So this particular coffee set, I've got images of various pieces that make that up. I've also broken that into individual parts in the parts table so that things like the dimensions can be part specific. As part of the moving of that object, you're physically handling and citing each object, so it's an opportunity to revisit the condition and completeness of those items and update the cataloging information about that. So on the left-hand side, condition and treatment is one of the pages that we have available in the object file. So this particular coffee set, we can see that we've recorded it as being good condition. We've made one very specific note about the coffee lid, which has a chip on it. And then we've also made use of the completeness table to describe that that coffee set would normally have 6 different cups and saucers, but the set that we own in the museum only has 4. Perhaps 2 of them were broken by the previous owners before they were ever acquired by the museum. We can also make use of the hazard and risk page to note any special things we need to be cautious about for individual items. One of the objects we have, for instance, has toxic paint on it. So I could search for that particular sculpture, which is Man at the Computer. And that's recorded on the administration and risk page. So the first page of the administration section can note any specific flags. So we've said that this object needs some kind of particular care when handling. And on the second tab is where we've put more details about that. So we've used the hazard type to flag that this has lead paint on it. So it needs care when people are handling that object. And we've added some generic notes about dealing with lead toxins. So that's a feature in Vernon where you can create general types of hazards, and then when you link them to any of the objects, those general notes about how you can handle those objects are visible on all of the different items in the collection linked to that. So if I clicked on hazard type and then use the go to button, I can see that related risk and hazard type file where I've recorded further details. So I've created a generic hazard type, which I've called lead toxins. I've linked it to various materials, which that covers, and it's the policies and procedures section, which automatically displays on the object page when we link to this. Similarly, there might be particular objects where they're at risk of something happening to them. So there isn't a risk to people when they're handling them, but the object needs some special care when you're working with it. So if we search for a sculpture where I've got a brain lamp, this particular lamp has got a risk to object noted. So this is an object where we've marked that it is particularly significant and particularly high value, and because it's a small object that's easily movable, it's more prone to theft. And so that might affect how you decide to transport it. You may actually need a person to be with the object through the whole of the journey, for instance. The Sargent Gallery were also making extensive use of the packing unit concept in Vernon. So that's something where multiple different objects can be put into one storage container. That might be a box or a crate. Sargent Gallery actually had some specialist movable containers on wheels. They were general purpose containers where different types of objects could be put in those, and then those crates would continue to be reused as they work through moving objects from one location to another. So if I open up objects that are in a particular packing unit at the moment, so I'll just search by current packing unit, and I'll search for all the ones that are in general box 3, which I've just called Gen 3. And there's a couple of things in there. So that gets recorded in the current location field. So We know where that particular box is. At the moment, it's on a shelf in one of our storage areas, and we know the name and details of that packing unit. So like the hazard file, this is a dedicated file in Vernon where we can then record a whole lot of information about that particular movable location and track what things are in it at any one time. So that's on the left-hand side. We can click on packing unit identification, and I could open up that same packing unit. And so we might have details describing what kind of container it is. We might measure it so that we know where it might fit in our storage locations. And then on the Objects tab, at any one time, we can quickly check and see what things are currently stored inside that box. In the case of Sargent Gallery, they were moving a huge number of different packing units. So something that we recommend is creating saved lists of groups of packing units that need to move together. Vernon CMS doesn't support packing units inside bigger boxes, so you can't do kind of nested boxes of a crate and then smaller boxes within that, but you can make use of the saved list facility to group together different boxes or containers. I've already created a list earlier of all of our general packing units because we're going to move them all in one single truck shipment. So I could open my saved lists and I can go and scroll down and find that particular set of packing units, which is general packing units from December. And so there's 5 different packing units now that have been grouped together. Again, I can use general facilities like List Manager to view those. But more importantly, I can make use of that list in the bulk move facility. So we've now grouped those together as a list, and we can now move them all together as one single step. So I can go to the Tools menu, and I can do Location Functions Bulk Move. And instead of entering in one by one a whole set of different individual boxes, I can use the search function. So I can just go to options on that field and do a search, and I can pick any saved list. So if you've made a saved list of those boxes, you can just pick that and bring all of those different packing units back to your location move. And so that streamlines then moving those 5 different boxes to their new location. So they've moved to a different offsite store as part of that relocation. So that's a quick recap of the 5 different presentations we had at the user group meeting and some of the different tools that each of those made use of.